Some people got real. Oh, my bad.
Yeah, no worries. All right. Good day, everybody.
Good
Welcome
afternoon.
again
Good
to
afternoon.
Wheels Up Live with ID Bound. And
I'm Felix.
all right. How are you, Felix?
I'm doing great, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. We're going to have a really exciting episode today.
Yes, looking forward
Uh,
to our guest.
for those of you who have seen the description, you know that Felis of Felis Simulations, the creator of one of the top, top add-ons in X-Plane, the 747-200, and what the heck, it's a 747-200. So,
Yeah.
it's a classic. It's
Mhm.
what I think continues to be one of the best looking planes that anybody ever made.
And certainly
Uh,
value for money. I mean,
oh,
not to like for what you're
100,
getting for that. That's pretty good in comparison to other offerings. But we'll get into that. So
100%. But of course, before we jump to our feature segment, as per usual, we have the news of the week, and there's plenty of news out there this week. I think we thought
yes,
we would focus on basically two big stories this week, and I'm sure that this will come as no surprise to anybody here. But one of the big ones this week is the Phoenix Block 2.
Block Two. Yep, finally out.
And this update, which was a long time in coming, many
Yep.
months overdue, supposedly, or at least based on Phoenix's own timeline, finally brings the IAE engine option to the plane, as well as, well, I mean, a host of other
Yes.
improvements. That change log is massive. But what's your impression, Felix? How's this release coming?
I've flown it twice since it released. I actually enjoyed it for the first time. I think air, and I've said this before, and I think I said this last time we did a live stream podcast. I think the Airbus A320 is the most boring aircraft. From a pilot's perspective, I should say. From an engineering perspective, I think the Airbus series of aircraft is fantastic. There's a lot of things that came with it, like the EFB. You can now push the load sheet to the CDU, which makes, I mean, things are a breeze. It's got full
Yep.
GSX integration, so now we're talking about I hate to compare. I mean, it is comparable because the product, but we're starting to get in flight sim labs territory of fidelity,
Yep.
of just kind of the feature rich. The EFB obviously I think isn't the moving map and that sort of thing isn't that FS Labs quality. But the sounds, the textures, I mean, just everything that they did, the artwork, deliveries that they've gotten, the people they've gotten deliveries from, like Tavers, Atrium, Javiation. These
Yep.
are all like high established names in the livery making game at this point, and those are liveries that you can get um, in the livery manager. You don't have to go to FS dot
Or flightsim.to.
or
Yeah.
flightsim.to. Thank you
Yeah.
very much. And to find them, you can just get them. So hats off to Phoenix. I am personally looking forward to the A319 and the A321 because I like things that are more performance related. So on one end you have the sports car of an airplane where you take A320 wing and engines and you shorten the fuselage and it's a little sports car, and then on the other end you lengthen it in the 321 and it's just absolutely garbage, takes all the runway and everything like that, climbs like
It's like getting the
dog crap.
900.
And so yeah, I exactly, it's like the 900 737.
Yeah.
It's just not good at what it does. And so yeah, good for Phoenix. I think we're starting to see the big thing. I think that's come out of this. I think we're starting to see developers understand, especially newer developers, that when you shoehorn yourself into a timeline, it doesn't really necessarily work. And I know that it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation.
Of
Because if you
course.
don't talk, if you're
Right. They're
Majestic, who
just as
hasn't,
angry if you don't say
yeah,
anything.
exactly. Because people are
Yeah.
like, "Where's Majestic?" And I'm sure they're
Right. Are they
quietly
out of
working
business?
on,
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And you
Yeah.
get all the rumors. But if you do talk, or you talk too much, now it's like, well, you haven't released it at exactly 8:32 p.m. on a Thursday, and I'm offended now, and everybody, so it's damned if you do, damned if you don't. But I think their style of communication, I think, is going to set a little bit more of a standard. as we move through. So yeah,
Yeah, I see your point on that. I think that they have struggled a little bit with how to deal with that. They've relied on heavily on Discord, although a mirror will occasionally pop up elsewhere, like even on AppSim. But they relied heavily on Discord, and then this the
yeah,
blog post that they put up. And I think that Discord has its upsides and downsides in this environment that they're in with that many followers that they have. It's tough for them. I would say I think that the product itself looks pretty good. Found a couple little flight dynamic things for me that I
sure,
thought were a little odd, but I think that may be going back to calibrating controls again, making
yeah,
sure everything's exactly the way it's supposed to be. Because if you don't, it'll throw you off. That's one of the things they're sort of telling people now, which I think is important. The pushing stuff from the EFB to the McDo, I think that's a great development for speeding things along, and also again, kind of a little bit of immersion. I mean, we know some folks who talk about that at their actual airlines, they don't punch a performance number in;
no,
it all comes in
no,
on A cars.
yeah,
So I think that is an example of where they're doing some really nice things. The
yeah,
GSX piece, I think, looked pretty solid as
yes,
well. I actually had a PDC request actually worked through the box the other day, which
yeah,
90% of the time it doesn't for some reason or another, but it
mm,
worked. So, I think that it's a really interesting update, and I think they mostly delivered on what they said they were going to deliver. And for those who went out and bought the mini cockpit FCU,
yes,
you can now see the altitude on your screen. You can see the speed and some of the other display values that were not otherwise accessible. There's still a few little quirks that I've noticed, but I think
sure.
that that's a really nice thing. And I'm sure the folks who are making the mini cockpit FCU, who sold them all out anyway, but regardless, I'm sure they're happy to know that that's something that's improved. Now we have another product that we want to talk about.
Just
Oh
one,
yeah,
minute,
sure.
Ivy. Harold, I see your question. As far as the news segment goes, like the Felix, we're mainly we're talking about the product itself. We're not involved with that project in any way. We're just kind of our opinion. But as far as Fellas goes, yes, you can, Harold, you can certainly ask questions and I will see them and try to get them to Fellas in an appropriate manner.
Yep,
We may not get to all of your questions, but we can certainly try.
and we'll have Fellas on in just a couple
Yes,
minutes.
yes, we
Um,
will.
so one of the other ones we want to talk about this week was Flight Factor, who again develops for X-Plane, has presented some additional previews and information about their 777 that they've been working on for a while. And I think, and here's a picture that they posted of it, and that should be one that I think is anticipated by a great many uh, users, but maybe with some trepidation. What do you think about
Sure.
that?
I mean, I think if we base it off their current offerings, the 757, 767, and I guess the A350, you really want to throw that in there. I think there was a X Plane 12 compliability or excuse me, compatibility update
There
that
was.
they did, and I mean, if you look at the price and you look at the version one of this aircraft, you're hoping that they don't make the same mistakes. I found some stuff modeling wise that I don't think is kosher. Some kind of distortion stuff with the cockpit and everything. Then again, this is work in progress, so that all
Sure.
that stuff can change before the final release, and I hope it does. But for me, I mean, I'm obviously you know I really need to see where X Plane 12.1 goes. I need to, honestly, and I think a lot of the community does as well, because PMDG
I
is
certainly
also
do.
offering their 777, right? And that's going to be a very, very hot, obviously different sim, and we can talk about the differences. That's not why we're here, but if I'm not going to spend something that in MSFS that's probably going to be what, $70. That's what I'm going to call it at, probably, because that's kind
Probably.
of the price we got. $70 for something that I've used for years, I know works, I know is going to be a solid release, versus this add-on, which I personally, I don't have the version one. I have the 757 767 from them. Not really impressed. I was more impressed with the 757 767. Not really impressed. um But this is just a wait and see. To be completely honest,
I'll
for
say this:
myself.
I've seen enough of the 777 in videos
Sure.
to know that I didn't want to buy it. So I have the PMDG 777 P3D,
Hmm.
and I have no doubt I'll have it in MSFS. But I wasn't inclined to buy it. Now, by comparison, just by comparison, because
Hmm.
one of the other developers that they have done a lot of work with is Tolis,
Yeah.
and even though they make A320 products, which are available in every sim,
Yes.
I have their A320 products in
Hmm.
X-Plane. So, I'm not averse to buying products in different sims with
Sure.
different takes and different
Absolutely.
characteristics and different
Hmm.
ups and downs, good points and bad points. But the Fight Factor was one that I did not buy.
Yeah.
So, it'll be interesting to see if they make up a lot of ground here or what happens. So I think
Sure.
that's
I mean, I'm
to
not
be
gonna.
determined.
Yeah, to be determined. I'm not gonna wish him ill will. I cautious, kind of optimism sort of thing is how I'm gonna approach this. Cautious optimism is the catchphrase, I guess, for me.
I think. I think that cautious optimism is a good way to think about it and look at it. And I think we'll just keep our eye on it. And as per usual, we'll talk about it when they put the next one up.
Sure.
Well, all right. We come to our big moment of the day.
Big moment.
We have Felis with us, and we're going to welcome him on.
Welcome, fellas. It's good to.
Hello.
There we
How are you,
go.
sir?
I'm pretty well, thank you.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, we're very excited to have you. And for
Yes.
those of you who don't know, Felis is the developer of none other than the 747-200 for X-Plane, which, as we mentioned at the top of the hour here, that it's one of the great add-ons that anyone
Yes.
has made for a sim, period.
Honestly, it's one of the add-ons I say that even though X-Plane isn't my preferred sim, I do go back just to fly the 747 every once in a while just because it's really good. So
So I got to ask, obviously you probably worked many years to put together the 747-200, but had you been involved in development for flight sim or other software generally before working on this project?
Before this project, I made a few other projects, starting from Illusion Il-14, then Antonov N-24, Yakolev Yak-40, then Tupolev Tu-154. So yeah, I had some experience before that, but in general, I didn't made any other like programming or projects other than Explain. So
okay.
So flight sim is what got you into programming?
basically, yes, it was
Eh,
my passion for the first time, and
Oh,
still.
so
Still is.
how many years have you been doing it then?
Oh, a lot.
A lot. Okay. Well, I could say
Yeah.
that about my work, I guess. I've been doing it a lot of years. People ask
Yeah.
me, and I have to start thinking in my head, what year was that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you have some real world flight experience too?
Mm,
Or just in the sim?
actually, yes, I did. I think like every flight simmer, they have some passion for aviation and usually go to some flight club and try it. So
Okay.
yes, I found some flight club in near to my location, and I ask. So they just you pay them, and they just fly you for like some time. And I ask like, can you give me to try to control it, or can you even teach me? So yeah, I did few flights and actual like a few landings by myself
Oh
with a flight
man.
instructor, of course. So,
Nice.
but
Nice.
it was
Wow.
long ago.
Yeah. So that's where it all sparked off, though. So or was maybe when you were a kid, or just how did that, as far as like initially into aviation, maybe?
Mm, I wouldn't say as a kid I was very interested in aviation. maybe in my university times when I first tried some simulators like Flanker and then Lock On, by Eagle Dynamics back then.
Yes. Yeah.
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 That gives me some interest. And then I found X-Plane. I think it was version 7 or something, like a very old one
Okay. Yeah.
back in the days. But I first tried to do something by myself. I think it was X-Plane 8 back in the days.
Yeah.
I tried to build. So I found out about Blender as a 3D software, and I tried to build something like ATC tower, so you can place it on the airfield, and you kind of could see the airplanes around you.
Okay.
Right.
That's a crazy idea.
So right, could you have a view from the tower?
Yeah.
Yeah, got it.
Oh
got
man.
it. Well, hey, look, I mean, they must have gotten they followed your idea because now you have a view from the tower in X-Plane.
Yeah.
So you must have been onto something.
Yeah.
Maybe it wasn't mine, but yeah. And when some idea is in the air, someone can do it.
Sure.
So you obviously the sort of I think the big project that a lot of folks are familiar with from you prior to the 747 is the 154.
Yes.
But then when you decided to stop developing for it, you went ahead and made it open source, which is kind of an unusual move. What made you decide to go that direction?
Well, I'm working by myself, and basically, and maybe a few people volunteering.
Sure.
And as I start a new project, I simply don't have much time to maintain my old projects. So that was one solution, to make it open and public, and maybe some mod makers and some other developers can carry on.
Yeah, I think we were talking about earlier. You're really big about the community and what the community kind of obviously your contribution to it, but what the community has also contributed to your add-ons. So I think it was actually it was as Dan said, it's rather unusual because obviously before people were paying for it, but I think it was a good move because a lot of people I've talked to a lot of people. I'm not a particular fan of mostly Eastern Bloc aircraft, but I know a lot of people really enjoyed the add-on, and so it was. I think that was a really good move on your part to allow that to be open source.
Yeah, it could be interesting to just try something different, because Eastern made aircrafts, they are very different.
Yeah.
They have different logic behind it.
I mean, I'll be quite honest. It's a lot of it's that I don't like it because it's obviously it's a foreign thing, right? So it's something that I'm not used to, growing up where I grew up. So it may just be as simple as, hey, try it out, and maybe it is something that I've enjoyed. So you may have a good point there. Yeah.
I would say the biggest complaint is a lot of documentation is just in different language.
Sure.
Not much
Sure.
available in English.
Yeah.
Well, that's one of those times where you have to say to yourself, I'm not going to be afraid to flip this switch and see what happens.
And that's what the simulator's for, right? That's what
Right.
the simulator's for. It's
Right,
for
exactly.
flipping switches and saying, "Oh, hey, oh, whoops, shouldn't have done that." Okay.
Right. And you'll see here actually one of the little screenshots today that I took of the 742. X-Plane was messing with me in the controls, and I was just working through a problem, and you'll see that I managed to light engine number 1 on fire. So stuff happens sometimes when
Definitely.
you're using the sim. But one of the questions I know I have, because I know why I love the 747, but what made you decide to work on the 742?
First of all, I think it's commercial reasons, because Eastern aircrafts are not very popular in flight sim community. And back then, I decided that I guess I have enough experience to try to make it.
Okay.
And besides, there was no other 74200 for X-Plane.
Certainly not an X-Plane, and the oldest one is the ready for pushback, and this is like FS 2002, 2000. Somebody might have to correct
2004
me on
maybe.
that. Yeah, it's a long time since there's a classic 747. So yeah.
For me personally, mine's an easy one. I mean, I remember flying on as a kid. It's just the iconic plane.
Oh, it
What,
is.
what else is there to say?
I'm
So
a. I mean, I'll say for me, the 747 democratized aviation. As far as you had a lower seat cost mile. So like the reason that Ryanair exists today, the reason that you can get EasyJet flights is because of the 747. All of that
I
is
guess.
yeah, it is for the 747. So yeah.
You can say before that the flying was like privilege.
Yes, it was. Yes, it
For
was not a
rich
lot
people.
of middle class people or of that. Usually, like you said, yeah, it was a privilege to fly. So yeah.
I would agree with that.
By the way, fella, somebody is admiring Sid Brajo is admiring your beard. They're saying good job on the beard.
Thank you.
So
Yeah, that's a serious beard. I got the amateur beard, so I can appreciate
Trying
that.
to make it longer, but
How's that going?
yeah.
So, well, for those of you who are wondering, who don't already know, this is the Felis 747-200. AJ took this one in the Korean Air Cargo livery.
Which the
and
logo's backwards. I know there's some people that might see this. That
Oh, dear.
this is it has the and I know it's being pedantic, but yeah.
What are you going to do? Okay, fine.
yeah.
Here. We'll do it this way then.
Hold on,
Hopefully
yeah.
we will. Hang on. Is it
Yeah.
coming?
No. This was a somebody made this livery. This is not a Felis. Somebody made this livery. So
Gotcha. All right. So
Yeah.
so here we go. Here we have a cockpit shot that AJ took for us.
yeah.
And as you can see, the 742 is a classic aircraft.
Yeah.
It's a steam gauge aircraft with autopilot and a lot of other features and some technology in it that I think is really kind of fascinating in a sort of a transition from some of the even earlier aircraft into what most of you know now if you've been flying, say, a 737 or a 747 400.
Yeah.
And it actually sort of brings to mind to me, a question in looking at this, like for you fellas, which is, what were some of the real challenging systems to build in this plane, given its age and complexity?
I would say it's a navigational system and maybe autopilot itself, but mostly it's actually quite simple systems. It's just too many of them.
Too many of them. I like that. I agree with that. There are a great many systems in there. So for those of you who may not know, so this is the original navigation system that came
Yes.
in the 747-200. It's the CIVA, so-called carousel,
Yes.
and it's pretty primitive compared to what most of us are used to.
9 waypoints. That's all the memory it has in it for 9
Right.
waypoints. Not even
Right.
10. 9.
Right. Don't get too excited. We're not going to give you too much. Well, fellas, maybe you can tell us a little bit about that, since you said it was one of the harder pieces. What were the challenges that you were facing there?
Well, the biggest challenge was like if you look at the panel, there are only a few buttons and controls, and which means that every selected mode is different, and the system should react differently. So organizing all of this was quite challenging.
And did you do most of the modeling as well? Did you have help with that? That must have taken quite a bit of time, regardless.
Yeah. Well, I did all the modeling, the texturing at the beginning, but then I outsourced it for other people, and they made wonderful textures in Substance Painter. I also did all the programming and some of the sounds for this project.
So
And the engine sounds, which is like the most exciting part, I bought
sure.
from Turbine Sound Systems, I think,
Yeah.
TSS,
so
and they did a great job.
yeah, so that I was actually sort of wondering about that because obviously sounds are a big part of it, and they're often a challenge to make. For those who are wondering a little bit about maybe what it sounds like or what it looks like in action, here we'll just share this with you. So you get an idea of the complexity in there with 4 engines, and these are obviously older engines. They were quite noisy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Ask anyone who lived under the Kitech uh,
Yeah.
arrival if it was
Yeah.
noisy.
Yeah.
Well,
Uh,
I don't think they took off into the city from Kaitak, and you
It
need to
depended
hear
on
the
the
roaring.
winds. It depended on the winds that I've there was there's a charted approach for a departure from that would be 3-1, yeah. A departure from 3-1, which is, if you think about it, the climb gradient is just insane there. That's pretty wild.
And
It's
you also need to
to turn, yeah.
turn. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But no, man, I would say that honestly, the greatest thing about your add-on for me is the Siva, because I didn't know about it. I had no, and I've been in flight sim for a couple decades, and I had no idea, didn't know how to use it, and I had some great help, obviously, from the community. The Felis Discord,
Mhm.
fantastic resource for a lot of this stuff. People on there that helped me out with the Siva, and it's really fantastic to use. And actually, I know you made the LTN, and I know that's been kind of like your baby and the big project recently.
Still
But
going.
yeah, still ongoing. I know, but I do prefer the Siva because you did such a great job implementing it, and especially like it's got real world drift figures. So if you're not updating and doing things like that, you can obviously get several nautical miles off your track, um, and
Yeah,
things
it's
of that
not very
nature.
precise, and somehow it happens that even before I introduce the simulated drift into it, by the coding and those calculations, it still gets some error over time.
Okay.
right. I mean, it's an interesting system in that respect, and one of the things that I think a lot of people may not realize, and I'm just going to put it back up here for a second, is these units, they don't automatically talk to each other,
No. Mm-mm.
which is sort of counterintuitive. You have to tell it to talk to each other, and then it can sort of work itself out
Yep.
with it. But I expect that for a lot of the pilots monitoring, and probably the pilot flying, depending on the airline, there was a fair amount of time in crews making sure that you were where you were supposed to be
Yeah.
with the system, and then rolling over if you had more than 9 waypoints, and figuring out which DME to do your next alignment with. There's a lot of there's a lot. I mean, the technology is certainly impressive for the time, but a
Sure.
lot of work. A
Well,
lot of
this is
work
why
for
they
the
have a remote function.
Yep. Exactly.
right, right.
and
But
and it was one of the points that differs my system from other Siva implementations. Like there is a standalone plugin which can bring you Siva this panel as a 2D panel, and maybe you can implement it into cockpit, but it's usually only one system.
hmm,
Yeah.
okay. Um, so one of the things we talked about with the modeling for those there's a tremendous amount of detail in here. I noticed that when we look at the exterior shots, um, for example, we have this shot here. And can you give us any sense of like how much time you spent just trying to put this basic model together? Because the details are pretty extraordinary.
Well, usually geometry is not a big problem. Maybe a few months, I would say.
Okay, well that's not too bad. And
Yeah,
for
but
those
then
of I'm sorry, go ahead.
but then when you get to texture and animation, then it takes time.
Okay.
So the animations, you would say, probably the texturing and the animations are really the bulk of the work when you're doing this
Yes,
sort of,
yes.
yeah.
And usually it's quite routine work, quite boring.
Yeah, because you're probably doing the same thing over and over again for different
Exactly.
objects, and yeah.
Right, which I was going to say must bring us to the inevitable, but here's what the cockpit looks like in detail. And one of those panels that seems to be over on the far right there looks like, well, quite a challenge from a, modeling and animation perspective, because everything that you see on there pretty much, I guess, except maybe the circuit breakers, does exactly what it's supposed to do, right?
Yes, yes. And some of the circuit breakers are also animated.
Yep.
Oh, I'm sorry. I
Some
may
of
not
them.
have actually tried every one of the
I
circuit
think that's
breakers. I'm
relatively
sorry.
new, right, Felis? Within the last couple of months, the circuit breakers.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, that's a relatively new thing that's been coming with. As I believe one of the questions we're gonna ask. By the way, to the people in the chat, just making sure I haven't like not noticed your questions, and we're gonna get to those here in a bit, more towards the end. So just hold those questions, and we'll get to them.
And for those who may not realize, these planes at the time had three-person crews with a flight engineer that sat behind the pilot and the co-pilot and managed this series of instruments here to handle things like fuel and power and packs and all the things that we sort of take for granted that have largely been integrated into newer Boeing products through computer implementations.
I can tell you that. Oh no, go ahead, Fellas. I'm sorry, I didn't know you were gonna.
No, I just want to say it's quite exciting and very interesting how Boeing engineers crammed all this huge panel into just few buttons on the overhead on 7400.
I was actually going to piggyback because that's what I was going to say. Your add-on actually made me respect 100% more what Boeing did with the 400, and basically cramming that whole thing into P6, which is panel 6 for the circuit breakers, and then the overhead, like you said. Yeah, it's tremendous what they did to. I mean, it sucks because it kind of eliminated a job. But but this is the march of technology, right? This is the march of time.
It is.
I know one of your main key helpers, especially with the testing, was a former 747 200 flight engineer and very knowledgeable. And the thing about it is those guys knew so much about the airplane, like way. I mean, because they had to, because they're right there, but those guys know so much about the aircraft because there was no there was no electronic checklist, none of that. It was hey, I got to know what this does. So yeah, it's a very, very complex aircraft to operate. I here's what I would say. I think it's deceptively complex because I think once you get a flow and you realize that even in the sim, I think a pretty typical simmer can manage it if they're willing to put in the effort.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's a far cry. I'd sort of describe it as can you do line ops with it and understand the basics of how it's supposed to work and avoid critical mistakes? Probably. I think it's a whole nother level to be in a position where you could handle a failure in any sort of real time basis, which I guess brings up that question that I know Felix had said that you're starting to add failures and other operational issues into the plane. Has that been rewarding, fun, frustrating? How have you found it so far?
You mean making it or flying it?
Making it.
Making it.
Yes.
I would say it was the same as everything else. And basically, when you have the system made of kind of like a blocks, you can just say, okay, this block doesn't work, and it just affects other systems automatically.
Got it. Good. So, which actually, I'm sort of curious because one of the things that has, of course, happened in the past, gosh, I'm going to say year, but of course now it's longer than that, is that this was originally out for X-Plane 11, and now it's come out for X-Plane 12, and X-Plane 12 is still all this time later, quote unquote, a beta product. How has that transition been for you as a developer?
Well, there were some problems with the engine models because they introduced a new model, and as always, it was broken. So I had to tune the engines again and make some corrections. And it looks like the new model may be more precise, but still, if you compare it to some data and documents, you still have to make corrections in codes.
And were there other complications besides the engines, or was that the big one?
Maybe the lighting.
Oh, because they changed them. They
changed it.
Yeah.
They introduced this attenuation, kind of like HDR, maybe. So yeah, that was a little bit of a problem.
But I'll admit that's one of my big frustrations with X-Plane 12 is I find the lighting, shadows. There are instances where it literally gives me a headache. So
the dawn dusk lighting, and it's not it's every cockpit. It looks like a nuclear explosion. It looks like the nuclear holocaust has happened.
Basically, if you fly up on some flight level like 300, you have to turn every backlight on because you simply cannot see the gauges.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. How do you think X-Plane 12 is progressing, and particularly with your goals for the 742? Is it getting where you want it? How are you feeling about that?
For me as developer, I would like to things stay as they were.
Okay. Stop changing it.
No changes. Yeah.
Gotcha.
They trying to make the best.
Is there something they're working on that you think will really benefit the 742, or you feel like it's more likely to just, give you headaches?
I don't know really, unless they do some major changes, and I will have to fix everything again.
Gotcha. And what's your do you have a relationship in particular with Laminar, or
not really?
No.
Not really. Okay. Are there other developers that you like collaborating with or talking to and sort of kicking ideas around with?
I don't know. I cannot name really someone who I talked much.
Okay. Well, that's okay. You're doing your thing, right? Your way, which I think we're all benefiting from. So,
I mean, I have some contacts with Toto from
Hot Start.
What they call it, Hot Start.
Hot Start, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm using his plugins like back in X-Plane 11 I was using LibRain and of course the LibRadio and and his plugin of better pushback is a very good one.
Yeah, I will say LibRadio is one of the. I wish Microsoft Flight Simulator had a version of LibRadio because that's one of the best, especially for an aircraft like this where you're either tuning a VOR, you're flying to a VOR, or you're using a VOR or some kind of radio beacon, ADF, what have you, to log into to tune in order to land or do something with a flight. It really does bring another level of immersion.
It is something that I kind of wish I had before when I was modeling the AN24 or something.
Sure.
When you have those analog radios and you have to check the signal strength and power.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Well, excuse me.
One of the things it's funny because you talked about the engines that I had mentioned earlier that I'd managed to burn one out. Well, just in case you're wondering, folks, this is what you can do if you're really not paying attention. Well, the thing.
Shame on you.
I know.
Shame on you.
My bad.
Is that LA? That's LA, isn't it?
It's LAX.
Yeah, definitely.
It's easy to use airport, and it's usually sunny, so that helps.
Yeah.
If you put the weather on. So I guess one of the questions, obviously, I think that everyone thinks about at least a little bit, even if they're firmly in the X-Plane camp, is that Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020, soon to be 2024, has obviously had a big impact in the community. And I'm sure everyone would love to know if you ever thought about bringing the 742 to Microsoft Flight Simulator, or if you even think there's a place in Microsoft Flight Simulator for a 742.
Well, if you're asking if I'm gonna do something for Microsoft Flight Sim, probably not, because it's a completely different system, different tools, and I don't know anything about it.
Okay, well there we go.
Yeah.
Have you tried it?
No, not really.
Okay.
I kind of been loyal to X-Plane. I don't know.
That's fine. Yeah. No, that's
Right.
fine.
Well.
I'm hoping that 12.1 other than breaking things probably. I hope that 12.1 does bring some of the performance changes, because I know that's been a big thing, and again, that's not your fault, but it's through Sassel, and Sassel the way
Yes.
Sassel is, and the fact
That's one of the
other
problems.
other add-ons have used Sassel, but the problem is most of the other add-ons don't have a whole flight engineer panel that's been modeled and everything
And
like that.
the custom navigation systems.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, X-Plane is certainly tough on the resources.
Yeah.
On the computer, as I was taking some of these screenshots today and just looking at the FPS counter, it's a challenge. It's a challenge, and
Yeah.
I like to build my own computers. I have plenty of power in the system, but it's X-Plane 12 just struggles a bit, and I'm hoping that some of the things they're working on will improve
It was a bit of
performance
frustration
overall.
for me when I upgraded my graphics card to RTX 4070 Ti, and I got like plus 10 FPS.
Right.
So here we actually have a good question that I was going to lead into anyway right now, which is what's kind of the future of the 747-200? Are we expecting a freighter? GE engines maybe?
I think yes.
Yeah. I mean, obviously no timeline, but like, do you think?
Yeah. I would say it's a very successful project, and
Sure.
there is no reason to just drop it.
Yeah, and I know I think we may have talked in the moderator channel maybe about the SP, the 747 SP. Is that something you have any interest in, or is that just?
As far as I know, there are like only few of them exist,
Okay.
and again, it will require remodeling of the wings and fuselage,
Yes.
and then you're gonna have to tune the weight and balance and stuff. Yeah, it's kind of different aircraft basically.
Okay. Yeah. So.
But a freighter is a pretty exciting option.
I think people. Can I tell you? I think the most requested, probably in order, are going to be probably the freighter, the GE engines, and then the 300. Which I know that I think on the Discord we have somebody that's working on. I believe the 300, maybe a mod. I don't know what that's looking like.
I think there's a mod for it, and also there are modes for different engines.
Sure. Yeah.
But to make it official, gonna need to purchase another set of sounds and make another tuning for the engines and stuff.
Yeah.
And in terms of a freighter, would that also mean sort of changing some of the modeling elements, I would think, at least for your interior modeling, which is pretty significant, actually.
And also the weight and balance calculator that goes with the 747.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure, that's obviously a big piece for any kind of freight operation. But I know for me personally, I'm with Felix. I think freighters always a fun thing to do, and I think one of the things that people forget about with a freighter that's really nice is, it gives you an opportunity to do, if you want to do real world, routes that people flew, to do those short hauls.
Yes, exactly.
I think one of the things that people forget is, oh, I don't want to fly a 747 because then I got to fly for 12 hours from Asia to the West Coast or something. Well, not necessarily.
Yeah.
And I think they're still operating.
They do. Aerostan and GeoSky. GeoSky being out of Tbilisi, Georgia, I believe. They have one or two, maybe three. I mean, there's people in here who are going to correct me on this, and that's okay because there's people that know a lot more about this stuff. But and I know Aerostan has one or two, and so yeah, they're still operating. And then of course we have who Iran, is it Mahan or they might have retired theirs. I'd have to look all this stuff up, but there's a couple in the world that are still operating. I think the GE still has the propulsion testing. They still use their 747-100 to do the propulsion testing. Yeah, and so I don't know, Dan, you have anything else? You got any other questions for Felis?
Yeah. So one of the things I'm kind of curious about is the infamous Felis Discord logo. What is the genesis of this logo? Where did that come from?
It's from, I don't know, maybe my childhood passion for pirates.
Okay, that makes some sense then. So yeah, I was always sort of curious about that. I'm like, what was the inspiration for this? It's kind of interesting. One of the things that I wanted to mention briefly, in terms of, well, obviously we have some in the Fellows Discord, these fans of the 747, and I think one of the things that people may not realize, which is really fascinating, is if you actually take this interior shot here, is that on the main deck, the plane curves to the front, and if you were sitting in, for example, 1A with the window near you, you could actually kind of look out the front of the plane.
I guess so.
And yeah, you could actually look out kind of the front of the plane, and you were actually further forward than the pilots.
Yep.
Because the staircase was behind you, and the pilots were a little forward of the staircase. But when you look at that front deck, they were actually behind folks who were sitting in, like, I think about the first two rows of the plane. So it's one of those unique little features that you've actually effectively shown here in your model if you go look at it. That's how accurate it is. So, I think you have continued to show that this is a really, it was a special plane, and you did it. You really did it justice, which I think I know I appreciate.
I think it's a very unique feature before they introduced the flight entertainment systems on modern aircrafts, where you can see some videos from live cameras around the airplane.
Right. I mean, people looking out the window.
They gave you that clunky they gave you that clunky headset, or they gave you the little, like, the old school. They were like white, and that's what you had. You plugged in, and you were watching whatever.
Yep.
And
there's
no choice.
It was little tubes.
I never used them myself, though. But you say, like, people watching the window. Only those who are sitting next to the window can do it. And modern aircrafts, they have 6, 8, 10 seats in a row.
Sure. Well, some of those 742s had lounges upstairs.
They did,
which were pretty cool. You could sort of sit there, and some of them even had piano bars, all kinds of crazy things. What's
the Frank Sinatra Jr. picture? I think it was on American Airlines. It was a very famous shot. Frank Sinatra Jr. He's playing piano on, and it was because American was short lived because the 73 oil embargo. Like, it was kind of funny how we are, as a country, we designed that airplane. Boeing designed it from U.S. and not a lot of U.S. airlines ended up getting rid of them really quick versus like other airlines in the world. So,
and,
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, just one little note. I think back in the 70s they allowed passengers to smoke on board.
Yeah.
Oh,
pure,
sure.
Almost nearly pure oxygen environment. Yeah, let's smoke up. Yeah.
No, I mean they had smoking here until about the mid 80s, maybe even a little later on planes. I can remember distinctly flying from California to the Washington, D.C. area and being near the smoking section, but not in it. Thank goodness.
And it's another reason for me to why I like this classic aircrafts, because it's not only where you can try to fly something that mostly not being flown today,
Sure.
but it's also kind of some history.
Yes.
A lot of history.
Yes, a lot of history.
A lot of history. You know, in fact, I was watching something recently. You may have seen this, fellas. You know that when Britain and France were working on the Concorde, there was, of course, a supersonic transport that Boeing had been working on, et cetera. And it was like, yeah, but the airlines, I don't know, we really want that. They're like, well, let me give you this instead, which is, I think it was Pan Am, right? Who wanted
Yes.
who wanted it,
Yes.
a different way to move people, and all of a sudden, they, I don't know, I forget exactly how many Concords they made, but then they made,
I think
a
it was
couple thousand
more,
747s.
more successful approach to public transportation. Like
Yes.
you can either fly people fast, or you can just pack more passengers in
Yeah.
one aircraft and fly
Yep.
slower.
And
Yeah,
they
I mean,
plan
but people think the 747 is slow. Even today, and I mean, it
Oh,
thing
it's
flies
no.
at like Mach 8 point zero, not Mach 85, 0.085. That's fast for a commercial airliner in any sense.
Yeah.
It's pretty fast. So
Yeah.
obviously it's
Well,
not
plenty
Mach
fast.
2, but you can, if you get a good tailwind, you can get plus 700, 750 ground speed easy if the crew's willing to push it. I think there was a 74700 crew a couple years ago that made the transatlantic records like 4 hours and 56 minutes
Wow.
across the Atlantic. So, which is, I mean, Concorde did it in what, a little
3
over
hours?
3 hours? Yeah, 2
Yeah.
hours. Yeah. So,
Well,
I mean,
you got to get out over the water. You got to speed up. Then you got to
Yep.
slow down. Not that you don't have to do those things in a commercial airliner, but
sure.
it's
Yes, and they did supersonic flights only over the ocean, and
Right.
over the
Yeah.
land they had to stay below supersonic.
right where it was inefficient.
Yes,
Yeah.
highly.
They're really inefficient. So
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's sort of interesting. So we have. So we're talking about. You mentioned you got a freighter. So that's, I think, I think that's a really exciting one. Is there other things that you sort of envision for the plane? Things you'd like to do or thinking about doing?
Well, for my next step, I would say yes. I would try to make a freight version, then maybe 300. I still have some interest in this Air Force One, but on the classic base. Like, I think it was E4.
Yeah. So there's the VC. The presidential one is the VC-25. The E4 is the doomsday plane.
Oh.
Yeah. That's the one it's NAOC.
Looking
and
glass, right?
Yeah, that's the one where it's like if it really goes down, that's a plane you don't want flying at a moment's notice, because it's that means it's gone to crap. it's over.
Right. I don't think we've really thought we would use that since 9/11. I think
Bush used, yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Bush
9/11.
used it in 2001. Yeah, he was he was on NAOC. Yep.
Yeah.
So,
The biggest problem is to get some information to make it.
yeah,
Right.
I can imagine. Yeah, that's kind of a hole you definitely don't want to go down.
Yep.
There's gonna be a lot of guesswork.
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, I guess
sure.
I think in the end, right. I think that's one of those. Nobody will know if it's 100% right anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's that, and it's funny you mentioned Felis. That you know the DCS story with Flanker and everything. At to a degree, they have to guess, because a lot of that stuff, like aspect ratios and closing rates and all that, it's all classified. So at the end of the day, they gotta guess
No,
at what's going on.
by watching some videos from some big YouTubers flying DCS, I would say a lot of information were kind of like propaganda numbers, and mostly like Russian biased numbers.
Yeah.
So sort
At
of
least
like
it feels like it.
so sort of like the Airbus A350 or no, I'm just kidding.
No, I mean
Propaganda numbers.
I mean when they show
I'm kidding.
this SU-50, I don't know, it feels weird.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I know it's funny, Dan. You're talking about the A350. I know exactly what you're talking about because when Airbus first released it, they did a little fudge on the numbers, and they've since updated the aircraft, and now it does what
kidding.
book value. No, I know, but I mean, Airbus isn't watching this, Dan. Don't worry, they're not going to come after you.
No, they're not going to come after us.
Another problem for developer, you only have official numbers, so this is
Sure.
all you got.
Well, that's interesting, though. I mean, I wonder about that because, as Felix was saying, guys like Yos who've sort of been working with you, who have some, real world experience or a lot of real world experience in this plane, where I'll bet from time to time the numbers really didn't line up with the book. It's got to be hard to decide. Do I just go with the book? Do I put a little fudge? Do I put a little factor in here occasionally that makes it a little more random? Or how do you kind of look at those decisions?
I would say sometimes people say, yeah, it's like, for example, I had some problems with the Tupolev 154, and like people saying the old engines have not that good performance, but I say, okay, I only have these numbers from documents, and this is all what I'm doing.
Yeah. And obviously, go ahead.
No, please go ahead.
I was going to say, obviously, oh shoot, did we lose Dan? Uh-oh. Interesting. I guess I can carry on, and he'll come back here in a second. So yeah, as far as the engine goes, I mean, at the end of the day, you don't have a lot of subject matter experts on this aircraft anymore, too.
Yes.
I mean, I hate to say it, but they're all dying. This aircraft, the majority of those pilots, in passenger service are, they're not, either they're too old, and there's a couple on not our server, but on your server, the Felis Discord. You have a couple people that are subject matter experts. But again, it's kind of one of those things. Like, have you found that is a challenge if you're working with those people, as far as like how maybe like their version of it, like, hey, this is what the plane did, and you're like, well, this is what the sim is allowing me to do. I can only go so far here.
Yes, there are always some limitation from sim.
Yeah.
Sometimes I take that data from official documents. Sometimes I try to watch some cockpit videos and check the gauges. Not many of them are actually focused on the gauges. That's another problem. And then you realize, okay, you don't really know the weight and the balance of the aircraft, so still performance could be slightly different, but it gives you some clues.
Sure. I have a couple.
I apologize. I lost you guys there for a second.
That's we hopefully we carried on. It still said it was live, but we tried to make it work. You only missed one question though, so.
And the stream is still going.
Yeah,
perfect.
Yeah, no, I see it's still going. I became unresponsive for a moment, which was sort of strange.
So I've got one question here from Harold Felis that says, if you had the chance, would you make a TU-144 either the D or the S? Is that something you've ever had? What I would call Concorde ski, which actually was beat Concorde to flight, believe it or not. But yeah, is that something you ever have interest in?
Not really, and recently I don't really have any interest in Soviet aircrafts.
Sure, yeah.
Maybe some Ukrainian, so I'm still have interest in N225.
Oh yeah, the AN225. That's a pretty so I remember you put that text out there, and we won't have to elaborate why, but as far as when you did that on the server. I know it's a very complex aircraft, 6 people to operate it. So yes. Is that something you would think that like you would try to call in help on, maybe in some areas from the community, to try to help you get that across the finish line, or is it just you still want to get that done on your own? And
Well, I still don't have like exact plans to start it, but
sure,
it's something like I just dream of.
yeah, okay, yeah, that's fair.
Which
Let's
is
see if I
actually
got
the aircraft's name. They call it Maria, which means dream.
dream. And so okay, so this kind of answers. Somebody asked about the Ilyushin 62. So obviously that's just not something you're gonna have interest in. And um,
No, not really.
no, the it's yeah. So any other classic aircraft? So let's say something like a 707 maybe, or A300B4. This is from Ender 2 Gold. Are those kind of aircraft? Do you have any interest in?
Maybe. Also something like a DC 10 or 11, I think.
Okay, 10 DC
10.
10, interesting.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't think there's a good. I
And
don't think there's a good DC 10 for X-plane. I think that
I don't think so.
I want to say Andrew Wilson one from way. I couldn't even tell you. Like that's before I was even an X-plane. So
Well, before I start any project, try to do some research and see if there are any competitions,
yeah,
or if there is something good, then I don't see any needs to start another one.
sure. And then somebody asked about the Ruslan, the 124, I believe, the AN 124.
Maybe.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So, and then we have, I think, Andre Sacchetti asked a question about other planes. I think for now, as Felis has said, and I'll let him, do you have any plans for any other planes at the moment, or is it just let's complete the 747 Classic?
Now, for now, I will work on this one.
Yeah. Now, just for me, because I'm a big Pan Am guy, how about the 100? Do you have any thoughts on the 100? I think it's really not that much different, but there are some little differences, like the
There are some
engines and stuff.
differences.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you mean the 3A?
Yeah,
engines?
like the garbage, the compressor stall 3A, and the convertible.
Slightly simplified systems, like even more.
Yeah. So no, so I guess
Well,
just your okay. Sorry, go ahead.
for me to consider the new project, like for example, if I want to make this cargo version, I still need to offer something. So not only engines and fuselage models, but I think I will try to make new gauges on the front panel. Maybe those tape gauges
Yeah.
for engines, for example, and maybe some other systems. If I take GeoSky as an example for this project, then maybe I will try to improve the navigation. I'm not telling that I'm gonna make FMC.
I was gonna ask
very
you.
complicated.
That
No,
is
don't
the-
do it. Don't do it.
Yeah.
In the suggestions, I
But
know
also,
you know this.
don't
That's
do
the
it.
most suggested thing.
But I may try to make the navigation display for LTN, for example.
Oh, okay. Oh, that'll be interesting.
Maybe it will be kind of fictional, but still useful.
I think people would still appreciate it. I think people would still appreciate the attempt and the effort, and I'm sure people would use it. I can tell you, because it's the perfect mix of like, yeah, no, it's not realistic, but the LTN, I don't think it saw as much service, obviously, as SIVA. I think airlines were perfectly fine with SIVA, and they just rode with it until the end. So, yeah,
I see LTN as like in between SIVA and FMC.
Yeah. So I can tell you that in personal experience, what I do is I turn Sim GPS on. I know it's a cheat, but I use the LTN because you can put the SID in and the star in manually, and it'll follow it with Sim GPS almost right down to the thing. So that's kind of like my little cheat. Oh, I'm real world, but it's not.
Sometimes you just got to do it that way.
Yeah.
What choice do you have? Depending on what you're doing or where you are or what your need is that day.
And I guess one more question maybe is with shared flight. Are you working with JSnap at all, or is it just kind of like he's asking you, hey, this is what I need with the aircraft?
It's more occasional. Like,
Sure.
yeah, they're asking me some data refs, some variables.
Yeah.
I do some coding to make sure it works properly.
I can tell you one of the most enjoyable experiences I ever had. I did a cross the pond in your aircraft with 3 other people on VATSIM. That is that's amazing. I know a couple people have done it as well. If you ever get the opportunity, anybody that's out there to have this aircraft and find 3 other people, and even if you don't have to do cross the pond, but if you find some on VATSIM or something, you fly it. It's really, really fun and enjoyable to have that shared crew experience. So,
True.
yeah.
I haven't done that with Felix yet. We got to put that on our list.
Yeah, we're on the list. Yeah, so you're on the back burner, buddy. There's like 30 other people that are like, hey,
whatever, it's fine. I dragged you into the 172, so there you go.
Dude, I appreciate that. We're going to talk about that after, but I honestly, I've been meaning to talk to you about it. I appreciate that immensely. But
well, we have do we have any other questions in the chat?
let me see. The other one is it's the other plane. I answered that, Andre Sacchetti, I believe is how you pronounce it. I'm sorry if I butcher your name. My apologies.
Right, it's not.
Felis is very much looking at the 747-200 and completing that freighter and other things that it entails at this point. So I think that was all the questions, other than I know we talked about the Ruslan, which there's interest. Obviously, Maria is obviously very, very interested in doing that. And again, just to reiterate, and I know Felis obviously knows this because he's himself, but he's one person, and he does have some help, but he is one person. So like obviously that's a huge hats off to you, Felis, for what you do, amazing work. But also the time piece of it, you got to understand that it's not, these aren't we're not going to have this in 2 weeks,
Exactly.
So
and sorry, one more question. I'll ask it to you, Felis. So we already asked it, but I'll just ask it again. Wondering if there's any chance on the SP. And so I know we talked about not really.
No, not really.
Yeah, no.
Right.
Okay, so yeah, there's just a Black Knight. There's a lot of I know operationally it's the same. I think it was like a 3 Medved was in our Discord saying it's like a 3 or 4 hour conversion course, but the actual plane itself, aerodynamically, the wings are changed, the flaps are changed.
It's just different.
Yeah, it's a completely different aircraft. So,
well, that's any kind of change like that's obviously a big challenge. People think it's easy to overlook.
I also wanted to add, yes, I'm working by myself alone, but yeah, I have community and people helping, and huge thanks to them.
That's great. That's
yes,
great.
and on behalf of the community, we thank you for a fantastic product. I see that Harold says, I know it's his birthday, so happy birthday, Harold. If you're in there, just I see that. But on behalf of the community, on behalf of IED Bound and myself, thank you very much, Felis, for the interview. Thank you very much for not just obviously the 747-200, but the other products that you've brought to the community and just the work that you've done for the community at large. Seriously, my hat's off to you, and thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
And as always, folks, thank you for joining us today on Wheels Up Live. And we've sort of run over our hour a little bit, so we'll wrap it up here and say thank you all. And we'll see you hopefully next week.
Harold, just another question. Felis did answer that. Just if you scroll back a couple of minutes, he did answer about the TU-144, but that's something that I don't think he's. You're muted. No, it's fine.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes, I did answer it, and I don't have much interest in Soviet aircrafts. Sorry.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, there you go, guys. Thank you much for tuning in.
Thank you all. I really appreciate it, and we'll see you all soon.
All right. Take it easy, and talk to you later.